What's up, good people? Michael here. Thank you for joining. This particular bonus feature is called Shift Change Redefine Print. Many of you have been following the Shift Change series and have been asking privately as well as publicly, can you get more details? Can you ask the interviewer, the negotiator, these types of questions? So this is what I'm able to do. I was able to squeeze in Ken Diaz to come in just to talk about the gray areas, the side letters, elaborate on things that you wish you could ask the negotiating himself. And based on that, he was able to sit down with me in between his travels to talk about the gray areas. So listen up, enjoy this bonus feature. Thank you for listening. Thank you for subscribing. I appreciate you. Stay blessed. What's up, good people? Michael here, back on another episode of Cooking for Politics, talking about shift change. This time I'm meeting once again with the negotiator, Mr. Ken Diaz. Welcome back to another episode. We've been on back-to-back episodes just talking about the TA, the negotiating environment, the political environment, what's at stake, and you've been passionate. And since then, I've gotten a lot of feedback that, why is X, Y, and Z? So we have some other burning questions. So I'm glad you were able to sit down with me just to talk about some other pertinent issues that we have. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to spitfire some.
Go for it.
All right. As you know, we travel all over the world, and when we work our long duty day, we need a place to rest our heads. And that's the hotel. The hotel is our home, basically. For many of us, we've often accrued like stays where we become a certain member of that particular hotel chain. But then you hear in the tentative agreement that there's a change in the language. And there are members who are concerned, like, wait a minute, are we now going down to lower our standards into what hotels, whether it be domestically or internationally? Could you explain what the new, benefit to this new hotel language?
Well, first of all, let me say we got charged millions and millions of dollars for the improvements that we got in this TA and hotel language. And I think everyone is just holding on to, why did you take business class out? And actually in the US, there is no definitive definition of business class, but there is business class hotels that are actually budget hotels that we do not believe fit the standards for flight attendants. Rather than concentrating on taking the business like out, which it would have covered hotels that don't qualify to meet the standards, you have to look into the hotel letter of agreement that's in the TA and see every requirement that has to be for each location. That's where the standards of the hotel really lies, and that's where the standards were lifted in this TA from current. And you also have to look at the part where the union's involvement in the actual procurement of the hotel is definitely increased in this TA rather than it is current day. So I, without one doubt in my mind, all of us that were at the table know we improved the hotel standards going forward in this TA. And there's no denying that. I mean, the company charged tens and tens of millions of dollars for the improvements that we got in hotels.
But was it?
And when I say charge, I mean everything is costed out in a contract. So it goes adding to the cost of what the improvements are.
But wasn't the union always actively involved in the procurement of hotels? Is this a new?
They were involved in the inspection process, Michael. They were involved as far as, the company and ALPA and the union would go inspecting hotels. We never were able to get all the information that we are going to be able to get in this TA. In other words, when procurement sends out for bids for the hotels, we don't necessarily see all the returned information that those that they put out for bid return to United. Under the TA, we are actively involved in knowing every hotel that a bid is sent out to, and we as the union can add our own hotels to that list that it has to be sent out for bid. And every result that comes back from that procurement bidding process, the union also gets a copy of the information that's returned, because I mean, quite frankly, do I think that United probably just picks the one with the lower price?
Yeah.
I do. That changes under the TA because we're seeing everything. So the standards of what's in the hotel language in the LOA that's part of the TA, what has to be at that hotel, that's what lifts the standard of the hotel. Not if you're just looking at the language where business class was taken out, because business class means something else to everyone that says it. Actually, Japan and Europe have a whole different definition of business class than the United States does.
So there's still food availability, there's still be room comfort.
Well, there's not only food availability, there actually has to be an on the premise restaurant
Oh,
where you actually walk into a restaurant, sit down at a table, and you're waited on. Those are the improvements that currently aren't listed, in our current agreement. Whether or not a flight attendant actually goes into that restaurant to eat, that's not the point. Having that language in there, the quality of the hotel is higher that has a sit down restaurant where you can actually go in and eat a meal. Don't forget, the company wanted originally you could walk up to a half a mile to a mile away from the hotel as long as it was within that distance. They thought that was sufficient. Well, you would have been in lower class hotels had we ever even entertained that, but we never entertained that.
oh no, that's good to know because when that word was taken out, business class, the immediate response is now we're going to Motel 6, La Quinta Inn,
Yeah,
and so forth like that. And
totally,
um
totally false. Totally false.
Other falls. Okay, okay. Because I don't know if you heard, but British Airways was trying to look for a hotel for their crew, and they mistakenly put them at an adult hotel, theme hotel. And when it was
Right.
found out, they were like, "Oh my goodness!" And so they switched.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, these thoughts come into people's minds. So, and also another thought was that we hotels will only be when they took out business class. We're thinking, okay, now the company wants us to only rely on DoorDash or Uber Eats, but that's only
Well, they actually did, Michael, in prior proposals. That's why every time I hear somebody, you don't accept the first, give from the
offer.
company.
Yeah.
There is no first give. There's hundreds of proposals that go back and forth just on one subject. And on this subject, yes, they actually thought if you could get DoorDash or a delivery service to the hotel, that met the requirements of the food requirement. No, because you could have been in a Comfort Inn, for that matter, and called for Uber Eats, and yeah, they delivered to a Comfort Inn. So that would have diminished the quality of the hotel, and we fought that back in many, many proposals that they were passing.
Well, it's good to know that, okay, the union involvement it has a little more teeth and there's more clarity, therefore, that the company has to present all the hotels that they're trying to solicit at with the numbers. Now, let's say there is a disagreement. So, Hotel
Yeah.
A was disapproved by the union, but the company says, no, you're still going to this Hotel A. Do we have language in there that we
Well,
dispute it, or how does this work when we have a disagreement?
yes. So we've actually strengthened the hotel dispute language. But Michael, I'll even use that example in the current contract. They chose a hotel in Palermo that we didn't inspect. We weren't involved in the selection process. I got involved in that. We used the current contract language, and we got them to move us last week. I don't know if everyone knows that. But since the move a week ago, we haven't gotten one report where we were getting dozens of daily reports on the Palermo hotel that the company had chosen to lay over flight attendants.
And that's the thing. It seems like it's an afterthought that when the company looks at a new destination, it seems like they don't do it in a timely manner. They just do it last minute. So if a
Well,
destination is going to start in May, they don't look until April 30th and then sign a.
so I don't want to throw different departments under the bus, but it's a structural problem in United because, quite frankly, when marketing goes out and makes the decision that we're going to a new place, whether it's seasonal or not, in this case, this was seasonal. And then by the time that they get that information to advanced schedule planning that starts building schedules, there's a large gap in departments not talking to each other. So it creates this last minute rush to go find hotels because they're all not getting the information at the same time. That's a corporate problem that they have to work on. We've pointed it out to them, but that is what's actually worsening the problem because departments within United aren't talking to each other as it's happening.
That's enlightening because there are those who say, where's the union in this? And they're not fighting back. Now, this is good information. Is there a time frame where, again, or a number of, let's say we're at Hotel A, it was approved, but there are issues that come up that was unbeknown
Uh,
at the time of the approval and when the contract was signed, like no heating, no water, or some
well,
type of room comfort issues. Is there
well, Mike,
steps in place that we could disapprove it and then
yeah. I
companies
mean,
has to remove
Michael, we're running into issues today about like HVAC systems that aren't working properly, and yet when the hotels were inspected, everything was working. So I mean, we have process today to address that. In the TA, it's strengthened because anytime there's an actual dispute, there's a hotel dispute process now that is not waiting for like, people say when you go to arbitration, you wait a year or two, a year and a half to hear a case heard. No, there's an expedited, separate process for the hotels where we can get these disputes in front of an arbitrator rapidly as things come up. And you're absolutely right. A hotel could be approved by both, whether it be ALPA or AFA and the company, and then something else goes wrong as time goes on. There is much strength in language in how we would dispute that. And for the most part, the language actually is so strong that I don't believe the company would want to go through the whole arbitration process because there's certain requirements that have to be met in this TA under the hotel procurement and continuing after contracts are even signed that the company has to uphold the contract.
and the
Not
like.
only that our contract, but the contract that they procured with the hotel. Because currently United is even in dispute with some of their hotels that they have gotten because it is violating what was agreed to when they procured it according to the terms of our contract.
And there's no another word that was taken out, not only business like, but downtown like. Can you explain that one?
Yeah, because Downtown Like actually turned into something that hurt us. Because when Downtown Like came into the pre-merger United world, I mean, Kevin Lum was president back then. That was like over a quarter of a century ago. When that came in, it actually worked for us because when you couldn't get the quality hotel in any certain downtown location, the Downtown Like still kept the quality of the hotel up. What this management team did with the word Downtown Like is we were never anymore going to where we should have been laying over on long layovers. They were using downtown like, and even some of those downtown like locations are actually close to the airport. So
Okay.
they were abusing the downtown like came in. It worked a quarter of a century ago. It doesn't work today because they found that loophole. So now we have to go back to downtown. So if you're flying to Paris, they have to look for the hotels downtown Paris, just like they do for the pilots under the new TA language. Now, if there is a downtown of a city that we serve that the union feels strongly about, that maybe that is not the place that we want our flight attendants, because there are some cities where the downtown, you wouldn't want our flight attendants to lay over.
Yeah.
In that case, there is language in the new hotel language where the union can bring that up to the company and mutual agreement, move it away from that downtown to an area more suitable for the flight attendants. But with the downtown in there is a definition of downtown. It existed in pre-merger United contracts going way back in time. So there's a definite definition of downtown, and that means downtown of where you're flying to.
Yeah, we're just adjusting for the time, I guess, because again, the business model of the hotel has changed, so
Yeah.
we're adapting to it. So here's something else that I guess we are now learning to adapt. So when I first started flying, we were called when the airline needed to notify me of an assignment. There was a beeper. And I had to find a payphone and I had to call for my assignment. Now, fast forward, there is a change in the language as far as contact, scheduling,
Mhm.
reassignments. Can you explain this point where it's interpreted? Again, this is just reading the tentative agreement at first. It seems like we always have to contact the company, the scheduler, to let them know that I'm here. Not only that, but
Well,
also on a layover, on a trip. Is there something like that where that was the case?
well, so it's a couple of issues, Michael. First of all, we're in 2025, so all airlines are going to electronic notifications. I mean, think of the times that even when we got communication from our employer, they used to put paper in your mail file and
Yeah.
things like that. That doesn't happen anymore with the internet. You're getting emails. Times have changed as far as computer access and how you and the whole airline industry is going to some form of electronic communication. Now, we did keep the positive contact in this TA for when there actually had to be positive contact. But let's talk about the reassignment. So, when we're talking about 7Q and everyone's in an uproar, oh, I have to check CCS, I hope they realize that, we were proven in negotiations the tens of thousands of times people check CCS now. No, you're not
Wait,
held liable
you
for
tell me the
anything, but
company showed you a percentage of the
oh
number
yeah,
of flight attendants looking at
tens and tens of thousands of times that people on their pairings are checking in CCS. Now, there's nothing wrong with that because there's no obligation to do anything under the current environment. But we can't say we're not going into CCS because flight attendants are going into CCS. The data is there. They're watching. Big Brother's watching. Okay, they have the data. So to say we don't go into CCS, that's just not true. But don't forget, the only time you have to go into CCS when after the passengers are deplaning, it's only the only message you can be getting is under Q. And this is what people are not understanding. Q is loss of flight time. So either you're going to have a message because your flight canceled, or you're going to have a message because you misconnected and your flight left already. You have to get a notification so you know what you're doing. Okay. In the old world, currently, there had to be this two-way contact of you and a scheduler. The flight attendant could initiate it or the scheduler could initiate it. But until that contact was made, there's nothing that happens. So these are all the complaints that we got. Flight attendants just sleeping in the bases because they can't get through to crew scheduling. They don't know what to do. Flight attendants on hold. Some people even going to bed on hold all night long and not having their call answered. That ends with this TA. The phone business we're out of, okay? The flight cancels, the clock starts ticking. If they don't have a reassignment in your line within 4 hours, goodbye, United. I'm pay protected. I don't need to talk to anyone. So, I mean, there are real advantages, even though people are looking at electronic notification as something bad. The industry has changed. Our world has changed. Everything is electronic. Okay. You and I started with the beeper. I started with the beeper. Okay. And then we went to the cell phones. And as we progress in time, I mean, systems become more advanced. Now, I wish that they would invest in actual IT platforms that run all our scheduling because, quite frankly, the companies running archaic systems that are so old. That's why so many things take so long to be programmed, to be implemented, because archaic systems. I mean, United runs 3 different systems that control our scheduling. And one of them, Cosmos, is like ancient. I mean, it just is. They need investment in infrastructure, and we stressed that through the whole negotiation.
I hate the fact that we had to date ourselves with the beeper. What the heck? We've been around that long. Um,
Yeah,
so
I
just
actually have that beeper still in my house in a drawer. It's just a memory of time.
I know. So when this is viewed by, I guess, the new generation, they're like, "What? What the heck is a beeper?" They'll have to Google search that one. So here's something.
Yep.
So just to clarify, so I'm working a trip from San Francisco to Chicago, Chicago with a layover in Newark. I am not looking at CCS unless when I land in Chicago, my trip to Newark is canceled. And now either A, I'm laying over in Chicago or they reassign me to go to Boston, I guess. What's Washington? Is it?
So the reason, Michael, they're saying to check CCS after every one of your flights is in case that happened. Okay, they're not going to penalize you if they see that you didn't go into CCS, but you are going to be responsible if your flight canceled that you didn't see the notification. So they're not looking to see, oh, did Michael make sure that he went into CCS after every one of his flights? No, what that is meant to be is, Michael, if your flight canceled, you need to look at your phone or your link because there's a message for you, and it's a notifier message to look at CCS because your flight canceled or you misconnected. It's only for loss of flight time. No, like they can't, Michael, take you off of your pairing and say, Michael, no, you're doing this. If your flights are running, you're just completing your pairing. This is only for loss of flight time.
So, and
And it's clear that we said to them, this isn't even for drafting. Okay. That's a whole different animal. They can't be using this for drafting. This is for loss of flight time. 7Q. And you have to read all of 7Q. Everybody says gray language. It's clear and concise.
okay.
It's written right there. And also look in the back of the TA. There is a letter of agreement on 7Q5, which is a different aspect of 7Q. So read all of 7Q in the the core of the TA, and then in the back letter of agreement on 7Q5.
So, which brings me up to this. You said the back of the tentative agreement. Oftentimes, that's criticized is where's these side letters? So, explain a side letter, and because that's always controversial. Why wasn't it in the contract? It's in the contract, but what is a side letter?
So a side letter is, well, I'll give you an example. You have July coming up, right? The holiday. If I didn't do a side letter with the company, you couldn't get the credit for not calling out sick during the holiday period because they can't give you something unless they can't give you of anything of value that isn't in the contract to give to you unless there was a side letter of agreements. So that's a side letter. And there's no union in the country that doesn't have side letters, whether it be ALPA, whether it be the Teamsters, whether it be the IEM. There's side letters. What we tried to do in this contract, and we're pretty successful, a lot of the side letters that were in the back of the JCBA. I mean, obviously, we took the ones out that had no bearing on today, like joining the workforce or the dependability point system coming into. I mean, that's all old and has no bearing. So that we took out. But there are other side letters that we actually put into the actual core part of the contract in the TA. And we moved as many of those into the language that we could. But there are others that have no place in the language. So they are in the back of the book, but they're part of your contract. So a side letter is anytime there's an agreement with something changes after the agreement is reached and there's a meeting of the parties. Under our structure, I can't sign any side letters without it going to all of the presidents, and they have to have 72 hours to look at it. And that's presidents from every base. They get to ask all the questions, and if they said no, the MEC president can't sign it because I don't have the vote. It's only the 14 local presidents, so it's not like Ken Diaz is going out signing side LOAs with the company. I mean, that's just not permissible.
Some would say, and that makes sense because you're saying the contract is evolving. Circumstances do arise that needs immediate attention by
Well,
the union structure.
can I give you another example?
Sure.
So everything that happened in Israel and everything, okay, I had to make sure that there was a provision that flight attendants made sure that they weren't forced into working those flights if they felt uncomfortable for their safety. So without an LOA detailing that, that couldn't have come to be because there's no way in the contract you can just refuse to go to a destination. So when people complain about side letters, I mean, I get it because they think it's something they don't know about. But if you go on our website, I've made sure that in the last couple of years, especially because it wasn't always done at AFA, that every LOA is on the website for flight attendants to see on unitedafa.org. It's there. Even the ones that aren't in the contract, they're on our website.
No, that's a good example, the Israeli issue,
Yeah.
because the
And
members would
that's what I
say,
mean. It's issues that come up that don't take place during the bargaining that you have to address that aren't covered under the contract. And quite frankly, many of them are always to the benefit of the flight attendant.
because members say, how come we can't vote on this side letters, this side agreement that's being made? But you just explained it that it's the local, all the presidents have to weigh in on it and they have a time
Correct.
frame and they could get the pulse from their local membership to say yay or nay on this, to give feedback, to give the authority
But
to
don't forget, they're directly elected by the members. So, and that's why they have the final say on what goes forward and what doesn't.
Here's another subject that comes across is the sunset clause. This is going on healthcare.
Mhm.
Let's clarify something. Why is it that one group, now for those outside, the merger happened between United Airlines, Legacy United, Legacy Continental, and Legacy Micronesia. Is that correct? Yeah. So they all merged.
Continental Micronesian.
So they all had separate health plans and benefits. So you had those existing. So what was done differently for the Legacy United that was different from the Legacy Continental?
So let's remember in the joint contract, we all came under the same medical. So medical is the same regardless of where you came from. What is different is the retirement plans for each group. Okay. So don't forget, Michael, we happen to have worked under a ruthless CEO where they stole our pensions. Okay. And at that time, there weren't laws in the country that protected us to get them back. Okay. So we lost our pensions. And so Premier Energy United, one thing we came out of that bankruptcy court when we lost our pension is we kept retiring medical care. Okay. And that's been in our contracts and it continued in the JCBA to make sure that we had retiree medical care offered to pre-merger United flight attendants. Now, pre-merger Cal flight attendants, that their pension was never attacked by their corporation that they worked for, have what is known as CARP, okay, and that's their pension. So, and CMI is in a total different pension plan. They're under the IAM National Pension Plan. So there's two different pensions for those groups. And then when we joined forces, meaning we all came together under the JCBA, what we had to do, and that's why we have an outside consultant that consults us on not only retirement plans, but also on medical plans, we had to make sure that going forward, that everything was equal between pre-merger Cal flight attendants, pre-merger CMI flight attendants, pre-merger United, and then all flight attendants hired after 2016. We had to make sure that the corporation was contributing in a way that made all three retirement plans, whether you had a pension or not, equal.
Okay.
And that's why you see that at pre-merger United and anyone hired after 2016 under this TA will get the 5% direct and the 4% match. It is different for the pre-merger Cal flight attendants and the pre-merger CMI flight attendants. So they get the dollar value of the 1% increase
Oh,
added to theirs. But if you go in the TA under the benefits section and you look at the pre-merger Cal and the pre-merger CMI, you see that they have different thresholds of what goes into their 401k, much less than ours, because don't forget, ours is our entire retirement. Theirs is just a portion going forward because they have the pension and United's still contributing to the pension plans. So everyone is equal as far as the value
mhm.
of all three retirement plans that are in the contract. And that's why they're separate retirement plans because, I mean, come on. After what we went through, I would never wish that on my worst enemy
Mm,
to lose their pension. So we have fought to protect not only pre-merger Cal flight attendants and pre-merger CMI flight attendants to make sure that their pension stays intact because we never want them to have to go through the pain that we went through of having ours ripped out from under us. But we have to make sure, and we have, and this is why we use the outside firm that we do that are experts in retirement plans and in health plans to make sure that everyone's is equal of what United is contributing to each flight attendant's retirement, regardless of where they started their career.
and it's weird because the sunset clause, I think it was always there. It's just no one was made aware of. I can't say no one was made aware. You didn't bring it to attention because depending on the time you came in, I must admit, retirement was so far away when I started my 20s. And then boom, you're like, whoa, what happened here? And then all these
So,
issues come up.
yeah, but let me speak to that, Michael, because that has taken us by surprise in these negotiations because I didn't hear about the sunset clause for since 2016 that it's been in the contract.
Mm.
Okay. I heard about the sunset clause getting ready for these negotiations, but I
Oh,
had
wow.
never heard of it. And it was always there. And we talked about it at the JCBA roadshows that it was in there. And don't forget, they had three different negotiating committees for the union. Cal never has that because what they have is they have a bridge from 60 to 65 where they pay out of their sick bank hours,
Oh,
and hopefully they have enough sick bank hours to continue their medical until they can get to the Medicare at 65. So theirs is totally different because they never actually had retired medical ever in their contract. So going into these negotiations as a unionist, we feel that all flight attendants should be offered a retiree medical plan. Now, quite frankly, today it's about half of our flight attendants that retire that take that option. The others go out on the open market and get wraparound policies, whether it be through ARP or through some other provider. But not for nothing, our insurance is good insurance. So there is a healthy percentage of retirees that do take our offering of retiree medical, and I believe it should be there for everyone. And I might have mentioned it on a previous show that I was on with you that Scott Kirby doesn't believe he owes anyone anything once
yeah.
they retire. And it's not just our group. The Teamsters on the property, their retiree medical sunsets in 2027,
Wow.
and that was thrown up to us through all these negotiations, like the Teamsters are sunsetting in 2027. Why would we ever think of extending yours? Actually, it wasn't the extension we were fighting over. We were fighting that everyone should be offered retiring medical. And when that door got slammed on us and time was going on, is when we started asking for extensions. Now, we didn't ask for a 1 year extension. I mean, we were at a minimum of a 5 year extension. That's where we started at. And we even went at some point to a 3. But don't forget, you got to get that other side of the table to agree to get it into a TA. And this was coming to the top. It wasn't even those that we were looking across the table at. They had no say in that. This was coming from the top. And when I say this was coming directly from Scott Kirby, it was coming directly from Scott Kirby. He would not budge on not extending. At the last 2 sessions, this is still the hot topic in negotiations. There was a lot of heated conversations. It got really, really tense and really, um, I keep my composure and I'm very professional at the table. But when this New Yorker gets mad, watch out. And that came out in negotiations because, not for nothing, these people have worked their entire career for this airline to become what it is. And you're trying now to rip even retiree medical from these flight attendants. So when he wouldn't budge, and when I say he wouldn't budge, don't forget, I think I mentioned it to you in a previous show I was on with you. Negotiations broke off 3 times that time in May, and we had kept pushing to get it back on track because don't forget we had no more dates from the National Mediation Board.
Mhm.
We had no idea when they were going to schedule us again, and quite frankly, we already knew that they weren't going to be scheduling us for the 2 weeks a month that they had for the last 6 months because they're busy with other airlines too and other contracts, and they believed that they gave us enough time to both sides come to an agreement. So as the clock is ticking and we finally got some movement, because they wouldn't even discuss an extension, when we finally got the 1 year, well, the 1 year was no good if we didn't tie it into a 365-day early opener. So it gives over 3 years to fight this battle again. And I actually believe whoever that next negotiating committee is should still fight for retired medical for all flight attendants and not just extensions on the sunset. I believe it's an obligation of an employer to give you something for all the time and decades you put in to this airline to make it successful.
You're right. And the fact that this is a political issue too, because employers are getting away with it. Again, my parents had a good pension. My parents had a good retirement medical. I mean, employers are no longer feel they should provide, again, like the Scott Kirby mentality, more after you work for them.
You're absolutely right, Michael. I mean, this isn't just a United
Yeah.
specific. This is corporations in general. Corporations in general, those days of that loyalty between the corporation and the employee, that's gone a long
Remember the
time
gold
ago. I
watch?
mean, this is like they want you to work as hard as you can while you're working, and that's it. They don't feel they owe you anything after that, and they don't feel, quite frankly, if flight attendants came and went and it just cycled through. I mean, I do believe they could care less if this just became a job. We fight it because it's our profession and
Mhm.
we have to protect this profession for generations that come after us because this is a safety profession. This is not, waiters in the sky or waitresses in the sky.
Yeah, no, so true, so true. Here's another topic that pops up. Why is it that, yes, we got an increase in pay proposed, but how come training
Mhm.
for flight attendants, like mandatory emergency training or the computer-based training, has not been increased significantly, or at least half of what we get?
Because this is where the competitors come in. So there's no one close to us as far as the CBT training, or for that matter, CQ training, in what the pay is at the other airlines. Ours is already so much more than theirs. I think American just went up to $75. They used to be $25. When you're comparing ours is the highest in the industry, and that's why we had to make decisions at the end. Where do you put that money? Do you put it into the wage rate, which I believe is more important because the more we can get it into the block hours, that benefits a flight attendant more. But yeah, do I believe we should have been paid more for these trainings? I can. Our argument got diluted because all our competitors pay so much less for training.
Again, that's pattern bargaining. Again, another example.
It's pattern bargaining, and you
Yeah,
try to leapfrog each other. Don't forget the pilots did the pattern bargaining, but they didn't do the leapfrogging. So whether you're a pilot at American or at Delta or at United, they're all making the exact same to the penny. They did the pattern bargaining. They didn't do the leapfrogging. I mean, we do the pattern bargaining, and then you have to leapfrog You're not going to go much higher than the others because then you become uncompetitive. Because we talk about it just when the airlines are making money. We also know that this airline industry has cycles, and we saw it with the pandemic. We're losing billions of dollars, and that 4% retro that everyone's complaining about in 2021, you would have never had a 4% raise in 2021. They lost over $2 billion that year. We forget the times that they don't make monies. Once they make money, we just think it's always there. No, it isn't. It goes to the stockholders. It goes to the board members. It goes in our executives' pockets. Okay, and we got to keep fighting that corporate greed to get our fair share of the pie. But they also are not going to make themselves uncompetitive to the rest of the industry.
No, no, for sure. And then about that 4% retro, because there are those who say, what's the difference between why is it a retro? Why is the company calling a signing bonus? What is the
Well,
terminology?
they can't. They can't. Actually, it's not just United, Michael. It's not just United. It's every airline. They cannot call it retro because they will get in trouble with the IRS, because that means they owed you back wages that they didn't pay you.
What what
So for
what
tax
acronym
reasons,
did you use?
no airline will ever call it retro.
You said an acronym.
It's a retro formula. I mean, you can see it. It's based on your earnings. A bonus payment was from the old days where every single person, regardless of what you flew or how much you earned, got a couple $1,000s or $4,000 or $5,000, basically just to try to get you to vote yes on a TA. A retro formula is based on your earnings, so it's based on your actual earnings. That's why it's retro formula. And I'm still proud of the fact, and I don't care how many people argue me, I'll debate it all day long. Our retro pay formula is the highest in the industry, not just of flight attendants, but of pilots. No one has a higher formula in their TA than United Flight Attendants.
You said the company would be in trouble by whom? I didn't hear the word.
By the IRS. They
Oh,
they
the
can't.
IRS.
No
Gotcha.
airline can call it a retro payment, because if they called it a retro payment, that's an admission that they didn't pay you something that they owed you from the past. There's tax implications. So no airline corporation will call it retro.
So they're just protecting themselves.
American doesn't.
I
I mean,
get it.
obviously, Delta doesn't get retro because they don't have a contract. But I mean, the Americans and the Alaska and anyone else got retro pay. No one calls it retro because they can't.
I see. Oops.
But it's a retro formula. I
Yes.
mean, they know that ours says retro calculator on our website. They know what we're calling it.
Yes. And that's
And actually, that's why we even got them to change the language in the letter of agreement for this, because they wanted to call it a bonus payment, even in the letter of agreement. If you'll see in the letter of agreement in the TA, it says one-time payment. So that was meeting them at the neutral ground, because we knew that they couldn't call it retro, but we certainly didn't want flight attendants to be confused and think it was a bonus payment, because it's not a bonus payment. It's
oh,
based on your wages.
so and that's good to know because they're saying, I mean, not they, but one of the things that has been commented is like it's the company's doing that protect their tax bracket, but not mine. But I see what you're saying. There's implications
Yeah,
that the corporations will be
yeah.
penalized.
And then I heard comments on social media. Oh my God, but our retro is getting taxed at 42. It is not. It's getting taxed at 22%.
Yeah. So
I
that's a
mean, we
lot.
have to keep it to fact.
Yeah. Well, that's something you just mentioned. You just commented that someone I heard on a website. Where is there a lot of misinformation out there? I mean, that you're combating constantly.
Michael, I got in trouble in my own house yesterday. Okay, from 6:30 in the morning to 11:30 at night, I spent 17 hours on social media because every single page I went had misinformations. There's actually even companies now that are putting out videos on RTA that we've had to get legal involved, and the international office in writing them, because the videos, I watched 4 minutes of a video that's on social media about RTA, and the whole first 4 minutes, every single topic is wrong, absolutely wrong. So who's even paying these companies to put up these videos interpreting our TA? And I'm not talking about all the AI
Yeah.
misinterpretations, because that's a whole nother story. Okay, I'm actually talking about companies that actually put videos on social media, and every single comment in the video was incorrect. Every single comment. I
Yeah,
mean,
but
it's mind-boggling.
that's
And
right.
mind-boggling. My phone yesterday, I mean, flight attendants, I'm not going to name them.
Mhm.
They asked me, Ken, can you please call me? Can you please call me? And I took time out and I was calling. I mean, I had over 35 phone calls yesterday, just answering questions. But the majority of the day I spent on social media, and I get it. I got attacked, and you got to have thick skin in this game. And I have the thick skin. I didn't have it originally, but I've learned, you
Well,
know, I'm not taking it personal, but I will not let a comment go on social media when I know it's totally false. I will go at it, and yes, flight attendants have come back at me about it, but I'm not debating. I'm not telling you how to vote, but I am going to point out every false comment that I see on social media. And I actually expect all the leadership of AFA to be doing the same thing.
All right. Well, this is good, because I'm going to just, this is a, you could say yay or nay on this. And this is something that's been circulating just because you just mentioned it. I remember, here's one. United's top pay is $96.58. Southwest top out pay is 97. How is this industry lead? This is what that's
I'm
something.
laughing because it's comical.
Oh,
I'm laughing because it's comical, okay? So there's only two airlines, Southwest and Alaska, that get paid for the mile, okay? So if anyone paid attention and listened actually to our outside financial analyst, not AFA, our outside financial analyst who has worked with every carrier, including Southwest,
okay.
okay? They get most of their pay for their shorter flights. If they had longer flights like ours average 1,500. Ours actually are the longest average in the entire industry. Southwest averages at 500. So for the shorter flights, Southwest flight attendants make more. For their longer flights, they do not. Okay, and if you put our pay scale running an operation at Southwest, you will see that United flight attendants would get paid more. Don't forget, Southwest doesn't have boardings because they have so many segments in their pairings, okay, because of the short flights. That's why they don't have boarding pay. So if you put RTA into Southwest, United flight attendants working on their system would make way more money than Southwest flight attendants. If you put Southwest flight attendants on our system with their contract, they would be making actually less than American would if they flew our route system. And certainly they would be the third lowest. So there is no way that Southwest flight attendants get paid more than United flight attendants. And everyone keeps forgetting, you see the wage rate in the TA. That is not your final wage rate. That is not including the average 7.5% you have to add to each of those figures to get your actual wage rate, because that's what boarding pay does. And the reason we can't put a definitive number on it is because the reserves and those that fly domestically have so many more boardings here at United that some of those rates are 15 to 20% more than the actual wage rate in the TA because of the amount of boardings they do. So, I mean, you have to take the whole everything in there and make an informed decision instead of just shouting out that Southwest makes more. I state unequivocally, and every analyst agrees with me, Southwest is not the top paid in the industry. This TA is.
All right. Well, I want, oops. Can you hear me? Yeah. So here's something else.
Can I bring up a subject that you haven't even mentioned to me that I want to address?
Sure. I mean, I have a list. The list goes on, but go ahead.
Well, I'm hoping that you bring up because some of these comments that I'm reading on social media that the union is forcing this TA on flight attendants.
Okay.
The union, why are they selling this TA to flight attendants?
So I have
That is an absolutely ridiculous anti-union comment because it is our obligation, as it is every union when you reach a TA, to explain the provisions of what was negotiated. How you digest that information and how you vote, that's your own business. But to tell us we're out there like car salesmen trying to sell it, what advantage is it? We're flight attendants. Okay. How many times am I going to tell people my term ends in 11 months? Okay. I'm working under this agreement for 4 years as a flight attendant. Okay. We are flight attendants at that table because only flight attendants know what we do on a daily basis. So to say that the union is selling it, what advantage is that for the AFA? There is no advantage. The advantage is that we have to educate on what we negotiated and make sure that you have factual information basing your decision. And if that's still a no, that's your prerogative in a democracy. But don't accuse us of being out there answering questions. That is our absolute obligation. We were at the table. We negotiated. And I know this management team inside out. And Joe Burns, who was the lead, general counsel of AFA, Joe Burns has dealt with Scott Kirby before, going all the way back to America West, to U.S. Airs, where he was there. I mean, he's dealt with Kirby administrations in quite a few airlines.
So, oops, yeah,
So that's why I wanted to address the salesmanship. There is no selling of this TA. There's just answering questions. How you vote is your own decision.
and you're giving information. I'll say this: the union has provided the websites. They have provided what do you call it? Small group sessions. You had those road shows. You had the virtual meetings. You're providing all the necessary tools, and I believe not only the union leadership but other volunteers are trying to help inform members to make an educated vote versus based on hearsay. And I think even you coming onto this platform is also showing your dedication and that you're putting your reputation, your experience behind this is to inform all members of the pros and the cons, not much more cons, but the pros of why we need to vote, why members need to make an informed decision. I want to go more on issues that you just talked about, misinformation, but also other burning issues. But time is running out. So I wanted to invite you to come back and we'll have another session on Cooking for Politics on shift change.
I will always come back to answer questions, Michael. I thank you for asking me back. I think it's valuable that flight attendants hear from me, and whether they agree with me or not, I mean, that's their prerogative in any democracy. But I mean, we were at the table, and I've been fighting corporate greed for 25 years. I came in as a 3-year flight attendant, actually despising my union, thinking we could do better. And here I am 25 years later, and yes, other generations have to step up and run for things and get involved with their union, because the union is actually we just hit 29,000 this week in flight attendants. So the union is the flight attendants. So I mean, everyone needs to get involved and step up and keep the fight going, because we have to protect this profession for generations to come.
So true, so true, so true. Stay tuned for my closing thoughts. I hope you enjoyed this shift change bonus feature, Read the Fine Print. The goal, as always, is to give you, the listeners and union voters, the information you need to make informed decisions. The entire shift change series is designed to help you understand the laws and the corporate and political climate that shape the entire framework of the negotiating process. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button so you won't miss future episodes. Stay tuned, and as always, stay blessed.